Warning, the following video talks through the solution to a logic puzzle. If you're not into that kind of thing, you'll probably find it very, very boring.
I think puzzles, and logic puzzles in particular, can be a good way to train your brain. They train you not to jump to conclusions and not to overlook possibilities. These are useful critical thinking skills to have in everyday life when trying to tell the difference between fact and fiction. I've recently discovered that when solving a logic problem, I'm less likely to make mistakes if I write out every step of the logical path I follow to the solution. And it occurs to me that I shouldn't let all that writing go to waste. If other YouTubers can record themselves solving puzzles, then so can I. But this is not going to be a real-time solve. Solving this puzzle originally took me over an hour, and not all in one sitting because I didn't know the logical path to the solution until I tried everything. Still, I hope you'll forgive me if I sometimes describe my thought process as if I'm going through it for the first time, for dramatic effect. I should also point out that I did check the answer in the back of the magazine after I solved the puzzle to make sure I got the same answer, but I didn't check to see if I followed the same logical path. The goal is to get to the right answer, not to follow a specific path. So the steps in my solution might be slightly different from the steps printed in the magazine's answer section. It usually is. All that matters is that the steps make logical sense, and the answer meets all the requirements laid out by the clues. This particular puzzle is a logic problem from Dell's Math and Logic Problems magazine, volume 162, with a cover date of January 2020. I've tried to recreate the page as best as I could, using photo editing software. Logic problems are kind of like the word problems we did in math class. You remember how much you loved those, right? Okay, maybe not. We're all familiar with logic problems which come with a grid of tiny squares, each square existing at the intersection of, for example, the name of a dog owner and the name of their dog. You mark a dot in a square when the clue tells you that the combination is correct, and an X in a square when the clue makes it clear that the combination is wrong. If you fill all but one square in a row or column with X's, the remaining square must represent a correct combination. Dell Magazines likes to have challenger logic problems, which are too complex for a grid like that to work. The key to solving a problem like this is usually to look for a clue that lists all of the entities, like all of the people or all of the pets, and try to fit information from other clues into that list. This is especially powerful if you can derive a second list from the clues, even if that list is incomplete. Then you can try to figure out how to overlap the two lists. We'll see how this works later. Let's read the story that introduces the logic problem. Colorful copies. Yesterday, when Mark walked past Cinco's copy Casbah, he did a double take. Through the plate glass window, he spotted not one or two, but 5 of his good friends. Well, that warranted a pop-in for him to say hello to all of them and see what brought them there. Inside on the wall behind the counter, the price list was up for all to see. Self-serve prices are 4 cents per sheet for white 8.5 by 11-inch copies, and 6 cents for color, 5 cents per sheet for white 8.5 by 14-inch copies, and 7 cents for color, and 10 cents per sheet for 11 by 17-inch copies, white only. For staff-copied material, 1 cent per sheet is added to the above prices. Mark found out that each of his friends needed flyers printed in a single color. One chose yellow. From this information and the following clues, can you determine each friend's flyer information, number, color, and sizes of his or her copies, as well as the total price he or she paid? You gotta love how the writers of these problems try to turn them into a story. Like, in real life, are you gonna bump into 5 friends in the same store and try to deduce what they're doing based on tiny scraps of information? Is that what friends do? Is that how friends work? Really, tell me, I don't have any friends. Anyway, let's look at the clues. 1. Albert and the person with the craft sale flyer ordered staff-made copies. Neither chose white paper. 2. The person who wanted copies of a guitar lesson flyer chose 2 different sizes of paper. The other 4 chose only one size. Uh-oh. One person ordered 2 sets of copies, while everyone else just ordered 1 set. I almost want a grid with 6 rows instead of 5. We'll just have to leave enough room in each of the paper size boxes to write 2 sizes just in case. 3. 4 of Mark's friends chose 8.5 by 11-inch paper, and the 5th chose red 8.5 by 14-inch paper. Now, be careful. We already know from the previous clue that 6 different sizes of paper were chosen, so clue 3 isn't telling us all of the choices. 4. No one spent more than $5 total. 5. Kelly spent the least. She paid $2 less than the guy who wanted flea market flyers copied. 6. Wanda, the person who paid $3.50, and the one copying a garage sale flyer, each chose a non-white color. The other two chose white. Now this jumps out at me as a clue which contains a list. In this case, a list of all the people, not by name, but there is information about all 5 people. This might be the starting point for our solution. 7. Of the 3 who made their own copies, one made 40, another made 52, and yet another made 120. 8. The friend who chose green paper spent the most. 9. Steve needed 70 more copies and spent $1.30 more than the person who wanted lost dog flyers. 10. Lynn spent 84 cents more than the customer who spent the least and $1.26 less than the one who spent the most. Okay, I've changed my mind. We're getting lots of information about the range of prices. This might be the list we need to start with. 11. Mark's friend who was having the garage sale needed fewer copies than the one whose dog was lost. And that's the end of the clues. To fill the grid, I'm going to list the 5 purchases in order by how much they cost from least to most. Clue 5 says Kelly spent the least, so she goes on the top row. Clue 8 says the person who used green paper spent the most, so that goes on the bottom. Clue 4 tells us the largest price can't be more than $5. We'll put that on the bottom row with a less than or equal to sign here. Clue 10 says that Lynn spent 84 cents more than the customer who spent the least and $1.26 less than the person who spent the most. That makes the highest cost $2.10 more than the lowest. Clue 5 says the guy who made the flea market flyers spent $2 more than the least. Now that's a list of 4 different prices. I skipped the middle row in the grid because that flea market flyer price looks pretty close to the maximum. Clue 6 also mentions someone who paid $3.50, but we don't yet know if that price already appears on this list of 4 or if it's the missing 5th price. I'm willing to move things around the grid later if I have to. Now, Clue 7 tells us that somebody printed 120 copies. According to the pricing system described in the story, the minimum price is 4 cents per sheet for 8.5 by 11 inch white paper, self-service. For 120 copies, that's $4.80, pretty close to the maximum. So somebody spent at least $4.80. What's more, since that price is for copies on white paper, it can't be the most expensive job on the list. The most expensive job was printed on green paper. So the person who spent the most spent more than $4.80. This gives us a price range for the highest price and therefore for everybody. So let's replace what we've written with ranges. Now look at Clue 6 again. Somebody spent $3.50, but that's not in any of these price ranges. It must be the missing 5th price. We'll move Lynn down to make room. So, who spent $3.50? Clue 9 says that Steve spent $1.30 more than somebody else. If Steve were the one who spent $3.50, that would mean somebody spent $2.20, but that's lower than the lowest amount on the list. So Steve didn't spend $3.50. Clue 6 tells us that Wanda didn't spend $3.50. The only person left is Albert. Clue 1 says that the person with the craft sale flyer did not use white paper. Clue 6 lists 3 people who did not use white paper: Wanda, the person who spent $3.50, and the person printing the garage sale flyer. Clearly the person printing the craft sale flyer was not printing the garage sale flyer. We know that Albert is the one who spent $3.50, and since Clue 1 tells us Albert did not print the craft sale flyer, the person who printed the craft sale flyer is not the person who spent $3.50, which means the only person left in Clue 6 who could have printed the craft sale flyer must be Wanda. We have to put both Wanda and craft sale on the same row in the grid, and there's only room for that on the bottom row. That forces Steve into row 4. So now we have a list of all 5 people, but there's another list of 5 people hidden in the clues. Clue 1 tells us that 2 people ordered staff-made copies, Albert and the craft sale person, who we now know is Wanda. Clue 7 tells us that 3 people made their own copies. The people who made 40 copies, 52 copies, and 120 copies. That's another list of 5 different people. This is what I was talking about in the introduction. These 2 lists have to overlap. We now know that the 40 copies, the 52 copies, and the 120 copies belong to Kelly, Lynn, and Steve in some order. I'll temporarily put all 3 possibilities in each box. Clue 9 says that Steve needed 70 more copies than the person who printed lost dog flyers. So he ordered more than 70 copies. The only number that fits is 120, which means that the person with the Lost Dog flyers ordered 50. There were only 2 rows left in the grid to place that number, next to Albert or next to Wanda, but we know that Wanda printed the craft sale flyers. Therefore, Albert must have printed 50 flyers about his lost dog. Steve spent $1.30 more than him, so that gives us his total. By clue 5, that's $2 more than the lowest price, so now we know the lowest price. Clue 10 says that Lynn spent 84 cents more than the least, and the highest price is $1.26 more than that. That takes care of all the prices. Clue 1 tells us that Albert ordered staff-made copies, which according to the story costs an extra penny per copy. He also used colored paper. The smallest price he could have paid for 50 copies, if he used 8.5 by 11-inch paper, is $3.50. Since we know he did pay that amount, we know the size of paper he used. Remember, Clue 2 says that somebody made copies in 2 different sizes. We now know that was not Albert. We know from Clue 6 that 3 people used colored paper. Wanda, the person who paid $3.50, who we now know is Albert, and the person with the garage sale flyer. Steve is not any of those people, so Steve used white paper. Since the smallest possible price for 120 copies is $4.80, which is 4 cents per copy on 8.5 by 11-inch paper, that must be the paper size Steve used. Again, Steve isn't the person who made copies in 2 different sizes. Now I'm going to take notes on the side of the grid because I need to make some deductions before putting them in the grid. Clue 3 tells us somebody used red 8.5 by 14-inch paper. This must be the third person mentioned in Clue 6, not Wanda or Albert, but the person having a garage sale. Clue 11 says that the garage sale person needed fewer copies than the Lost Dog flyers. There were 50 Lost Dog flyers, and since the only 2 people in the grid who might be having the garage sale made 40 copies and 52 copies, the 40 copies must be the garage sale flyers. By Clue 2, we know this person only used 1 size of paper. By Clue 7, we know this person did not order staff-made copies. So going by the price list in the story, 8.5 by 14-inch colored paper copies are 7 cents per copy, for a total of $2.80 for 40 copies. This fills the first row of the grid, and now we know that Lynn was giving guitar lessons and made 52 copies. Clue 3 says that 4 people chose 8.5 by 11-inch paper, but 1 chose 8.5 by 14. We found the one who chose 8.5 by 14, so we can put 8.5 by 11 in the rest of the boxes in that column. But Clue 2 tells us that the guitar lessons flyer was printed on 2 sizes of paper. We'll leave room in that box for a second size. There are 2 color boxes left to fill. We know from Clue 6 that we need 1 more white and 1 more color. Here's a quick side note. Don't forget to go back and check the story text, the part that comes before the clues. There's often some piece of information in the story that isn't mentioned in the clues, and that makes it easy to forget. It often isn't useful until you're near the end of the solve. In this case, the story told us that somebody used yellow paper. By Clue 6, Albert used yellow, so Lynn used white. Let's figure out how many copies Wanda made. By Clue 7, Wanda ordered staff-made copies. That bumps up the price an extra penny per page. The price list has 6 cents per copy on 8.5 by 11-inch colored paper. We bump that up to 7 cents per copy. $4.90 divided by 7 is 70 copies. The only thing left to figure out now is how Lynn's copies were split up into 2 different sizes. We know she used white paper, and she didn't pay the extra penny per page to have the staff make copies for her. Let's ignore for a moment the sizes we've already written in the box. If she didn't use 11 by 17-inch paper, the largest paper she could use is 8.5 by 14. If all 52 of her copies were on that size, she would have paid $2.60, 5 cents per page. But of course, some of her copies were on smaller paper, which would make the total lower. But we know she paid more than $2.60. So 8.5 by 14 can't be the biggest size of paper she used. She must have made some of her copies on 11 by 17-inch paper, and that gives us her 2 paper sizes. Now we just need to figure out how many of each size. This looks like a job for algebra. Yeah, I know you're all excited for that. I mean, you could use trial and error until you stumble on the right answer, but this is faster, believe me. We'll call the number of 8.5 by 11 pages X, and the number of 11 by 17 pages Y. The total number of copies is 52, so X plus Y equals 52. The 8.5 by 11-inch copies cost 4 cents each, and the 11 by 17-inch copies cost 10 cents each. Lynn made X copies at 4 cents each and Y copies at 10 cents each. The total cost is 4 times X plus 10 times Y, which equals 364 cents. Well, not really cents. We've multiplied cents by pages, so it's 364 penny pages, whatever that means. But we don't have to worry about that. Let's multiply the first equation by 4. If we multiply everything on both sides of the equal sign by 4, we get a new equation that's just as true as the original one. 4 times x plus 4 times y equals 4 times 52, or 208. Now we can subtract this new equation from the second equation. 4x minus 4x is nothing. 10y minus 4y is 6 times y. And 364 minus 208 is 156. So 6y equals 156. And once again, this new equation has to be just as true as the others. If 6 times y is 156, then y must be 26. Y is the number of 11 by 17-inch copies. Since Lynn made 52 total copies, she made 26 of the smaller size as well. And the puzzle is solved. Thanks for watching this video. I tried to spice it up a bit with graphics and sound effects. The next and probably last video in the series will be about a puzzle that's full of math. It was a pretty intense solving experience that almost made me feel like I'm getting some use out of my bachelor's degree. It got me thinking about why I love math, and I'll talk about that in the next video.